Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Georgia Haddad, and I'm a senior manager with the government affairs team at the Partnership for Public Service. For those of you who are not familiar with the partnership, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we work to build a better government and a stronger democracy through policy advocacy, leadership development work, workforce programming, and convening leaders across organizations and sectors. And we know that this is a particularly difficult time for many of our federal colleagues and our foreign assistance partners. So we hope that the resources that we and our partners today can help provide offer you at least some support as you navigate this current moment. So to everybody on the line today, I want to say thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your service. With that, just a few notes before we dig into today's conversation and we introduce today's partners, panelists, and moderator as well. Throughout the webinar, you'll see that there's a Q&A function, so you can feel free to submit any questions that you might have through there, and we'll do our best to answer what we can. If you would like your question to remain anonymous, please just make sure that you click the button to make sure that you remain anonymous. We'll do our best to make sure that nothing is, public anyways. All of you are able to see us, but you can't see each other. So don't feel concerned about any of that. But you might hear my colleague, Natalie, or myself jump on the line to say a question out loud or make sure that we get to as many questions as we can. But given the complexity of everybody's individual situation, we may not be able to address everyone's question that comes up today, but we will have future FedSupport sessions. So if you'd like to learn more or maybe have a topic in mind, be sure to fill out the eval at the end of the session, submit a topic for a future session, and we'll try to cover as much as we can. And then, of course, if you miss a talking point or want to watch any of this back, you can. We record all of our sessions on our FedSupport website and YouTube. My colleague Natalie will drop that link in the chat, but know that you can always go back and watch to see what's happened in the past. So just as a reminder, today's session will have two parts. The first will be a panel that's moderated by Karen Lee with us today, and they'll share about their experiences working in the aid community, both connected to their federal government efforts and then their experiences transitioning to new sectors as well. And then it'll be followed by my colleagues who will share some resume resources, tips, and advice for you to consider as you navigate your next opportunity. So to get us started, I'm going to pass it over to our partners from OneAID. Welcome, Kate and Julia.
Thanks so much, Georgia. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Hurley. I'm one of the co-founders of OneAID, along with Kate Klepacki. We started OneAID back in February at the outset of the dismantling of USAID. And I was a senior policy advisor in USAID's policy office, and Kate was a policy advisor within the Bureau for Humanitarian Affairs as well. But our mission is to sustain and empower the U.S. foreign assistance community. We have served as a convener and information hub to carry forward the knowledge, expertise, and dedication of this community that transcends borders and advances global peace and prosperity. I want to emphasize the fact that OneAID is for everyone. We are not just for USAID folks. We are not just for federal government folks. I was a contractor at USAID. We are for everyone that touches or is connected to U.S. foreign assistance in any way, shape, or form. And we are here to be a home base for you. We have over 33, actually, I think we're up to like 35 or 36 groups that cover 40 states plus Europe. And encompass over 3,000 members at this stage. And so if you're interested in joining us, please jump on oneaidcommunity.org. We are here to support you. We're really, really happy to be co-hosting this webinar with Karen at FedsForward and the Partnership for Public Service. So just want to say a huge thanks to our partners for that. But we try to put together as many resources as possible for everyone in the space. They're all found on our website. We have our broader community that I just talked about. And then there's a lot of resources on the website about educating Americans about the importance of foreign assistance. This is a really challenging time for folks, but really hope that this will give you some tips and tricks to help you as you are transitioning in your career. I know I'm excited to hear a little bit more since I'm still in transition. And just to share one little bit with everybody of vulnerability, I guess, I've applied for over 200 jobs in the last year, and I've had 0 interviews. So you are not alone in this challenging moment, and we're all here to help each other. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much, Julia. All right, I will get us passed over to Karen, who will be moderating our panel today. Thanks so much, Karen.
Georgia, thank you. And Julia, thank you for setting the tone for today, where not only in sharing your OneAID story with you and Kate and how you lifted up, um, I think there's so much beauty that is coming from this, where we are now all establishing an infrastructure and enduring capabilities to make sure that those of us who are supporting public sector work writ large have the support we need as we move through our career. So thank you so much to OneAID, Julia, Kate, and the entire team there for doing what you do, and also setting a tone of us. We're going to get real today and vulnerable and share things that we probably have always needed to share as we move through our career of how we do it, what makes it work, and how we can stay really authentic to ourselves and our mission as we move our careers right now, perhaps outside of the public sector context, working more traditionally with the federal government as feds, implementing partners, supporting capabilities across the financial assistance world, and moving into other sectors. My name is Karen Lee. I'm with FedsForward. We are an organization that is part of building that enduring capability to ensure that we can transition our careers both outside of the government and continue that public service, but then also bring it back into that public sector context. But most importantly, right now, I'd love to introduce our guests, who are really the main event today, who are going to share how they've transitioned their careers from various parts of the government or as implementing partners and other enablers to other sectors and other kinds of organizations. So I'd like to do to just start off is have this esteemed panel introduce each of yourselves and just give us a little bit about your background. This will be in the order that I just see your boxes on my screen. So I'll start with Dua Amin. Dua, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Dua Amin. I was formerly a contractor at USAID, working in the Bureau of Global Health with the Office of HIV/AIDS, and I'm currently a policy and advocacy manager at Health Equity Solutions, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization in Connecticut.
Thank you so much, Dua. I'm really excited to dig into that transition and what we're going to learn from it. But first, let me continue with Selena Westland.
Good morning, everyone. Well, morning for me. I am on the West Coast. I am Selena Westland. I worked at the U.S. Institute of Peace for 7 years, from 2010 to 2017. And in 2018, I transitioned to the private sector and have had a number of jobs in different industries since. And I'm looking forward to talking to you all about what that has looked like for me and how to pull the goodness out of corporate.
Wonderful. Sarah Miner.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon also to everyone. So I'm Sarah Miner. I was most recently a senior technical advisor with the Office of HIV and AIDS with USAID, where I had been for 1 year prior to, less than a year, 7 months, a brand new job prior to DOGE coming in. And before that, I've spent most of my career overseas. I am currently a prevention coordination specialist with Fairfax County government here in Virginia.
And to round us out, Sarah Ellison.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I was previously a senior policy advisor at USAID as an institutional support contractor working on implementing the local capacity strengthening policy and lots of different localization stuff, but previously had spent all of my career, about 17 years, in international development and foreign assistance, mostly in the USAID implementing partner community. Just about a month and a half ago, I started a position with Open Fields, which is a small for-profit social good consulting firm based out of South Carolina, where I am a senior consultant.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And let's just get into it. We have no time to waste. And I'm just going to take the elephant in the room and just put it right out there. Many in this community worry that our international experience won't resonate. That it's not going to be applicable to domestic areas of focus or in the private sector. where all of you have had a journey where you've done that transition. Would love for you to share your thoughts of how you've navigated that and translated your skills and your background into the work you're doing now, and or how you've seen others do that translation of their skills, especially in connecting with hiring managers who might not be in the international assistance field.
I'll jump in. So my background at the Institute of Peace was education and training, and then public affairs and communication. That has translated into my work. I did a few years at an education technology company, and so being able to pull in that experience of working in government and building education training materials for quite a few years, that transitioned really well into being able to tell my story of being able to identify with the people that we were talking to, whether it was higher education or government. I think in general, it's important to look for a company or an organization that one shares your values to some extent. Not nowhere's perfect, but whatever that, like, Dua was speaking about, she worked in HIV and AIDS research and work. Sometimes it's easier to look for those organizations that have those types of missions. And I say mission knowing that everyone in public service and foreign assistance is in a mission. And so I have always found success, like Julia, through my career. I've, again, hundreds of applications and very, very few interviews. The places I've had the most success are where I'm able to apply the mission set that I have had in my past life to the mission set of the organization. To me, that helped narrow down the places that I would look at, as opposed to just throwing out as many applications as possible, and because it can be overwhelming and daunting and kind of soul sucking in a lot of ways, because you're putting so much out there of yourself. You're being really vulnerable in your cover letters and trying to make a connection with these places. And so for me, it's helped find, I have been more successful when I've been able to be empathetic to the company. So I'll stop there.
That's great, Selena. And I'll just jump in as well that so at Open Fields, their core capabilities are really around strategy, research and data, program design and development, and organizational design. And for those of you who knew what I was working on at USAID, those are very aligned to things that I was interested in. And so though it's a for-profit consulting firm, it's still focused on the social good and still brings a lot of those things. So kind of what you were saying, Selena, is like seeing where those opportunities are that do align. And so I didn't have the numbers that Julia did, right? I was focused a little bit, trying to be a little more focused. But I was also concerned, like you were saying, Karen, about, okay, so how do I translate that international experience? Because my entire history has been working in international and foreign development and foreign assistance. So something I really spent time on during the job hunt was also doing pro bono consulting with US domestic organizations. So doing the kind of organizational development, strategy design and development, the things that I was doing internationally, domestically for small organizations, to kind of build that body of experience and understand kind of the nuances to working domestically. And that really helped me emphasize that when I was applying at Open Fields, that yes, I've done this internationally and I can bring that skill set and those tools to the things that are aligned. But I also was able to say, like, and I have been working domestically as well, even when it was unpaid. And I know that that's not always an option for everyone. People need to be able to survive. If you are interested in thinking about what that could look like for you, and what that could mean. You know, can't be 100% of your time, but another former USAID colleague and I started Local Pivot to help encourage people thinking through that. I dropped the link in the chat, and we're having an event tomorrow to think about, you know, finding a pro bono fit during your job hunt, if that's interesting for you. I know that really helped me in my search.
And if I can chime in, I would add, in addition to what Selena said about finding organizations whose values sort of resonate with you, this was really key to me. So I spent 14 years of my 20-year career overseas. And I think for those of us who spend a lot of time outside the US, our job is not just like our job. It's central to our identity. And so I really had to spend a lot of time working through the fact that like my career was not where I was, it was what I did. And sort of working through that identity piece and then slowly over time translating onto my resume, right? So you know, if you had asked me on the street what I did a year ago, I would have told you PEPFAR, right? And so over time, I worked from PEPFAR up into HIV/AIDS, up into public, you know, up into global health, and then eventually sort of got up far enough removed from that identity of having done, you know, HIV work overseas or global health overseas to I work in public health. It's what I do. And I can do that somewhere else and I can contribute in a new community. And that being part of the global community will remain part of my identity. But it's okay, sort of in one of these like crazy once in a lifetime crisis situations, to set that aside and really focus on what I need to move on in my career.
And then just really quickly, I think what was really helpful in my job search was trying to figure out what skills can I pull from my experience at USAID that can, you know, kind of be marketed to whatever role I was looking into. So in my current role, a lot of what I have to do is related to writing briefers, policy research, et cetera, all things that, you know, were done at my time at USAID, stakeholder engagement. So I think it was really helpful to sit down and kind of take away the sort of like subject matter expertise and really focus on the skill set. So even though at the current moment I may not be an expert in domestic health policies, those same skills that I acquired at my time at USAID can be used in this new position. So really kind of doing a little bit of soul searching, if you will, and trying to tease out if I take away the HIV, if I take away the health, what skills do I really have? And that was really helpful.
This is extraordinary. I think between the four of you, you've dropped some amazing, amazing insights. And if I may just try and kind of pull it together from, you know, I heard that one of the first things at ceremony you shared that we all need to do is decouple our identities from a role or an organization that we were working in, and instead identify for ourselves and bake that identity in what is the thing that you care about doing in wanting to pursue and continue your work in public service. I think that's so powerful, Sarah, because that enables us to not be anchored in one place in order to do that, and widens the opportunities for us to seek out other places that share that mission and vision. I think that goes to you know, the point that that Selena, you made, which is find an organization that aligns with your values. So once you know kind of what you want to do and what you care about that's inherently authentically you, then finding those organizations that seem to line up and being choosy about that is a really important component that you're sharing to figuring out what that next thing is. I also then heard, Sarah Ellison, you made this excellent point of not only identifying work that you've done as a volunteer that might bring a connection and bridge your skills to a target role, place you might like to continue that service, but also, you know, identifying, you know, some of the work that you might have done in the past in a professional capacity. Selena, you talked about that. Dua talked about that. Sarah as well, and knitting that together. And then the fourth thing I heard, just as part of this kind of roadmap that the four of you just laid out so elegantly, was then, Dua, you kind of helped us tie it together by looking at what you've done, even in this most recent role, and trying to put aside the subject matter and extracting that into skills that are agnostic, because all of us have done work that requires skills that are applicable in any organization, any sector, any issue area. So thank you. I think you have literally, in just a matter of minutes, laid out just a secret sauce roadmap. So thank you for that. As you've moved through, your careers, I think one of the questions that has come up in the chat is how to frame up your work. So for those of us who might be further along in our careers and might be a little worried about bias and kind of candidly just our age, or those of us who've just done such extensive things and might be worried that we might seem overqualified, right? And passed over because we have done so much. Would love you to talk about how to fit what you've done in a way that doesn't unwittingly screen you out because of some of those biases that might exist as we look to other organizations.
I would love to take that one to jump in. So my background going into private sector has been from really small company to extremely large company. And I'll say I found the biggest parallels to government in the large company in terms of a range of experiences and age to where I see less bias today in a very large company against age than I saw in other smaller companies. And again, that's just my very limited experience with 3 private sector companies, but I saw the greatest parallels in that large company where you weren't seeing directors and senior directors who were 22 years old. You were seeing them with 20 plus years of experience. So I think it goes back to that fit of take a look on LinkedIn, look at who their directors and senior directors are, VPs across the board, because some companies will value that experience and demonstrate that in really great ways, and some won't. And it's impossible to always know which ones are going to do that bias, but it's impossible to avoid it as well. But I've seen a larger success at a larger company that has a range of employees who have been in their careers for a very long time, whether at one company or at multiples.
All right, thank you, Selena. We have a question that I'd love to just take by the horns. And the question comes in as one related to the dreaded applicant tracking system. And I will read the question, but I'd love to just reframe it in a little bit. So the question comes as one of my main struggles using enough language from job descriptions and postings to get past the gatekeeper applicant tracking system. And for those of you who don't know what that is often most organizations have embedded in their HR systems for recruiting purposes an automated system that can basically screen resumes, because oftentimes they get hundreds or sometimes thousands of resumes. And so a way to cream those down is something generically that's called an applicant tracking system. Every HR system has their own. But this is used to kind of cream down to a smaller set of resumes for review by the HR department. So the question comes to the fact that, that applicant tracking system is really difficult sometimes to get through so that you can get to a real human. But how do I get through that and balance with providing my resume what I've really done? Where that question comes to us and it speaks to the ATS, I'd like to first just turn it just a little. And and I think Julia shared at the outset, the experience of applying to 200 plus places. I'd love if the panelists, if you'd be willing to share your experience of how you went about finding that job Did you go through in the first instance just an application, a cover letter, a resume? Did you go down a different route? People talk about the dreaded networking. Would love you to just honestly kind of expose to us how you successfully navigated that career transition and search.
I'd love to jump in here if possible. Is first of all, you're going to hear our experience, but that doesn't mean that your experience isn't going to be entirely unique and different, and you'll have your own pathway. And something that I found really frustrating when I was really in the thick of it was people being like, follow these 3 steps and you'll have success. Like, maybe, right? So I will absolutely share my experience, but yours might look different. And I know it's a challenge, right? And different jobs will have different outcomes. So I have had friends who have worked the ATS and done their percentage match using, different AI algorithms. And that's worked for them. I have to say, any of the jobs that I applied for where I didn't have a connection, I did not have an interview. So I had about maybe 35 or 40 applications compared to Julia's like 200. And then I had maybe about 7 or 10 interviews. But those interviews were all people that I had a connection with there. So that leads me to the networking piece. And I think when people hear networking, they're like, yeah, but my entire network is unemployed. Me too. Me too. So what did I do? I basically had a small group that continued to grow as like a monthly job search email newsletter, where I'd be like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Here's the jobs I've applied to. Here's one way you can help me. And here's an updated resume or link to my portfolio online or whatever. And one of the big pieces I did in there, one of the asks was introduce me to someone in your network that would just be an interesting conversation. And so they didn't have to be hiring, but like theoretically they're employed. There's someone outside of my network that I can talk to. And that was incredible. And then my ending conversation with those folks was like, hey, can you, introduce me to one more person that you think would be interesting for me to talk to? And can I add you to my job search email update? And that was incredible. I started getting from my community of folks who actually knew me and who were in that email list, I got much more interesting recommendations of jobs to apply to than what I was like the algorithms were feeding me. And then I had direct connections, folks were like, oh, my friend just posted this job. Great. So much more direct connections to those jobs that were there. And ultimately Open Fields, where I ended up is a friend of a friend as friends with the CEO and had just introduced me to have an interesting conversation. And we really hit it off. They didn't know that Open Fields was hiring. I didn't know Open Fields was hiring when we had that conversation. But it was an amazing fit and really matched skills. So I'd say, you don't have to like go to every event and hand out your business card to random people, but leveraging the network and your champions that you do have to help find those opportunities to apply for, as well as potential new connections. And that was really, really valuable to me. And sure, yes, I still like checked my resume and application against the keywords and tried to fit those in and all that. But I didn't have any success through just the random application. So that's just my thought.
I want to chime in next because I think I had the exact opposite experience of Sarah, which is that I was totally unsuccessful in figuring out for any organization that was using ATS. I applied for maybe 100 jobs in the private sector. I didn't get a single interview. Any organization that was using AI screening or ATS for resume mapping, I completely bombed at. So I just full disclosure. I also did not have a connect. Ultimately, before I found my current job, I had interviews with seven different job interviews, and none of them were at organizations where I had any connection. But they were all at organizations who had humans screening resumes. And so if you're having trouble navigating that space, I can recommend that for the most part, in my experience, government is not yet using AI or complicated ATS to track resumes. There's literally still a recruiter who like has their little table and it says 15 years of experience and they're like, check. And it says like master's degree and they're like, check. And so if for some reason you're like me and you are not able to navigate like the AI screening of resumes at all, I would consider you to look at some of the nonprofit organizations, local and state governments. This is, I strongly suspected this. And then just last week, I saw that Fairfax County, which is where I ended up, published a job process navigation guide for job seekers that made it clear that a human is reviewing your resume when it comes in. The other difference, just to add one more thing that I found between private sector and government, is that government will say this job is open from X day to Y day. And any application that comes in during that period is given fair consideration. And that's how government hires. A lot of us are familiar with that because we came from either a federal or a federal adjacent space. In the private sector, they may only take a look at the first resumes that come in over the first 3 or 4 days. And so if you're applying for jobs, which I was, because I wasn't being savvy about it, that have been open for 2 weeks, they've already interviewed the people and moved on to the, next round. So, I would sort of think about those things as you consider how much time can you put for, applying to a job the second it drops. If you can't do that because of your other life, what's going on in your life, you might think about organizations that tend to have like opening and closing dates that are stated for their job openings. Just some ideas.
In my experience, funny enough, it has been a little bit of what Sarah and Sarah both just said, because for any interviews that I did get, it was definitely through a connection. I knew someone who was able to refer me, and those were the only interviews I was able to get. And then in terms of what Sarah Miner was just saying, I also had a little bit more success when I had to submit an application through, sending my cover letter and resume to someone's email address. And again, I think that's related to, not being able to crack the applicant tracking system, and the AI couldn't figure it out. I would try putting all these keywords, using ChatGPT, et cetera, but my resume was never able to get through. But I was able to hear back from places where it said, submit your resume and cover letter to our HR representative, and here's the email. And I think that's, because a human was able to read my application. And, I was able to get the interview afterwards. So that was my experience, which was definitely, like I said, a mix of what the both Sarahs just spoke about.
And I'm the kind of opposite of a lot of everyone. None of my jobs have been from a connection. They've all been through cold applications and in the private sector. So I don't know how I cracked it. I did not try. I think I just remained honest of what I've accomplished, and made sure that and I didn't rewrite it for every job posting because I submitted too many applications. And so I think for me, it was just being authentic, and maybe that's what did it, but who knows? It can be luck, to be very honest with you.
I do see, though, across your 4 very different experiences, which I absolutely love. I think this is so great, that there actually are some threads that carry them all together and knit them into like one very coherent suite of kind of experiences and perhaps advice. Though, Sarah Ellis and I take your point that these are all unique, and there's not like one size fits all, and there's no kind of eat this pill and you'll be like a superhero. But I do think there's a couple themes that I heard. One was humans. Humans are good. Humans are really good. And finding a human either to apply to, where it's a human, to Sarah, your point, like here, send this to a real human, or connecting with real humans to get you opportunities to have more conversations about what might be out there. Humans are key. I think one fact I'll just share with everybody who's listening today is we know that so many of the organizations are using these ATS systems, and we also know that there are applicants who use AI to literally throw at applications to thousands of places. So I just learned of a website yesterday. I think it was like mylazyrecruiter.com. And basically you put your thing in there and it will literally spray to thousands of places based on just some keywords that you say you're interested in. And so that's what employers are having to deal with, are lots of applications from people who really don't even know what they're applying to, in addition to your very thoughtful ones. So where humans are key, I heard one is find jobs where maybe you apply to a human, because those ones aren't ones that AI can help people apply to. And two, kind of the point of networking, where I love how Sarah and Dua, you talked about it, where it's not about networking for a job, but really networking to find people to learn more. Sarah, you highlighted an insight that you end up talking to somebody who didn't even post a job. I think that's also a really important key, is this notion that timing. Oftentimes the jobs that we could get are ones that aren't even posted. And when you find the match with that hiring manager, that's when they say, I want to post it because I want you. So I think that was really, really important to get out there. And then finally, I heard Selena, you say very explicitly, but I think it carried across everybody, this point that being authentic actually is like a key strategy, because where you're focused on what you're looking for, you actually are hacking the system, because you're very precisely honing your applications to things that will likely be places and people who want someone like you, because you've already done that pre-screening kind of those organizations and those people yourself.
Could I add one thing to that? And I think this probably goes across everyone as well. Don't be shy about bragging about the things that you've accomplished. You've done incredible work for this country. Brag about it and contextualize it. But when I say authentic, I mean brag. Like sometimes we're modest in what we've accomplished, and that could, I just be authentic, demonstrate what you have done, the impact that you have, and that goes a really long way.
This is a great point, Selena. And if I could real quick, and then Sarah, I see your hand up. At the last webinar that we did, it was a panel of individuals who are government attorneys who have pivoted on the outside. And one of the panelists, to Selena, your point, said what you did even more crassly. What she was a government attorney turned tech startup founder. And what she shared, which is 100% true, is people on the outside exaggerate. They don't necessarily lie, but they exaggerate. And when they exaggerate, what they mean by that is they might not have done everything that they say they have, but they know they can do it. And I think when we talk about bragging and just being very bold about what we do, it is not only saying what we've done, but where you know you're good enough and smart enough to learn what you might not yet know, then just say you can do it. Say you can do it. And there were some examples that we talked through in that webinar, which I know is posted, and it's an extraordinary one if you have a moment to watch it. But this point of being very explicit about not only what you've done, but if there's something that you haven't yet done, don't say you haven't done it. Give an analog that might align to that and say, yeah, you can do blank that the job requires, because you know you can learn. The last point I'll make on this that I thought was extraordinary that I wanted to share with this group is this panelist also said, hey, look, everybody exaggerates on the outside. We as those in the public sector are very humble. And so we want to make sure we give things exactly right of what we have and have not done. But where people on the outside do exaggerate, they assume everybody else is exaggerating. What that means is when we say that we've done X, Y, Z and we stop, or we're kind of humble, on the outside, the perspective is you must have done less than what you just said, because we know we're all exaggerating. So if you said that, you probably have done less too than what you just said. So it's a little bit of a, I won't say it's a game. I think it is, though, a reality on the outside that there's a confidence that comes from the experience that folks have had on the outside. You too should have that confidence, and where you present what you've done. If there are areas that you have not yet encountered, but you know you can do them, just say that you can without any hesitation. But Sarah, I'll pass it to you.
I'll just add to that, and this was partly to speak to our wonderful FSN from USAID Pakistan, who Julia answered in the Q&A about having imposter syndrome. Is I think that's absolutely correct what you were saying, Karen, to be really explicit about what you did do and taking ownership of that. And there's so much at USAID. We're such a big bureaucracy. We were such a big bureaucracy. Even in any of the international development implementing partners, USIP, such a big group that you're like, well, we designed this training that had some follow-on impacts. Own those, right? Like, I led this training development. Not only did it reach 30 people across 12 countries, but because that training, those 30 people started 4 different projects or 10 different projects, each worth over $5 million each. So saying like, through my training and follow-up support, we started over, $50 billion of new projects addressing ocean plastic pollution in 4 countries. That's real. Like, yes, you did it with other people, but once you're in that interview, you talk about that. And actually the teamwork is very valuable in the interview, right? And how you work together and accomplish that big thing is important in that interview, but it's also true to write it in the resume. And I know that's a really, like, it's something great about our sector in general is that we're like working together and gathering feedback and input. But in the resume, getting down to like, what was the impact is really, really important. And we all have imposter syndrome. But just think about your favorite colleague. What would they want you to write? That's what you should be writing. What would you tell your colleague to be like, no, you did that. Do the same thing for yourself.
Let's continue to reveal things that have not ever been talked about. And I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, but it's all in service of making visible the invisible. So there are misconceptions or stereotypes or biases that sectors on the outside might have about international assistance professionals transitioning from the public sector to another sector. Would love if any of you on the panel would love to, share what are some of those misconceptions or stereotypes, positive or negative? And if they aren't positive, if they are more negative, how have you overcome them? I can give some teasers to start that are more generic, not just to international assistance, but just those in the public sector to get the juices flowing, right? But some common stereotypes of those in public sector are we're bureaucratic, we're too process oriented, we're not creative, we're not risk taking, we're slow, we don't work hard. Those are generic ones, if you'd like to take any of those on, or if there are ones that you have found or just see where you sit that are misconceptions about international assistance professionals. Would love you to talk about that and in total, how you overcome them.
I haven't encountered that at all. I'm going to be very transparent with you. I think I've only experienced current company. I have a colleague who is former USAID who came in within 2 months ago. I haven't. Maybe it's because I've found myself marketing back into government, so the government knowledge is appreciated. So I think, I guess my biggest advice is again to find an organization or a company that is a good culture fit. And if anyone wants to find me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to talk about how I've navigated culture fits because I don't think we'll have time here. But that would just be my biggest advice. I haven't actually dealt with that.
Selena, if I could ask a quick follow-up question on that, though, I'm sure you have a whole bag of just tips of how to do this, but what are 1 or 2 key questions that you've asked in the past to just determine almost like a litmus test if it's a culture fit?
I prefer to work remotely. And so one of my questions is on the hiring manager, what they like to do in their free time. To me, that tells me they have a life outside of the job. And then also just for the company, if I'm talking to the HR person first, how they manage meetings, and what their internal processes are like. I have been in companies that do not have a lot of processes, and I have found that to be very challenging for me. But I think some of the larger companies, like the company I'm at now, is much more process oriented, and that is a good culture fit for me. And so, really, just asking the questions of, if there's a problem, who do I go to? If I'm struggling with my manager, what is my route to reconciling? Things like that. I can put together a greater list and send it to you all if you want to send it around. But those are just a few of mine.
Selena, it's super insightful, because what I heard you frame up as one, given that you know that you like process, looking for an organization that has process. So it started with you first, you knowing what you needed in terms of a work environment, and the questions that would follow from that of how you work and making sure that aligns. But then second, your question of what the hiring manager likes to do in his or her free time, that really, I think, unpacks this very important kind of scoping out process of the person that you're working for. You have to jive with that person. And if your work style is one where you don't have a life, maybe it's cool that the other person doesn't have a life, because you guys will be working all the time together. But knowing at a human level, going back to the human importance, the nature of the team and who they are as people, it sounds like that is an important component, like, of the microculture fit that you sought out.
I'll add very, very quickly is there's only really two things that I've encountered. Is one, that folks who have worked in the government are slow because our timelines are longer and we don't have the quarter to quarter profit pressure that a lot of for-profit companies, that's how they're measuring success. And so, it's hard to explain that in a resume, but I think that's really easy to talk through in an interview when you're talking about, setting deadlines, keeping those deadlines, working with so many stakeholders, following guidelines, and then still delivering results. So, I think that's really clear. And the other thing that I've really struggled with and continue to struggle with is folks don't understand the scope and scale of what foreign assistance, USAID, international development as a sector is if they're not in it. So if you just have on your resume, like, supported change management at USAID, people don't understand that that's, upwards of 120 countries and 10,000 direct employees, let alone additional staff. So a random organization reading that doesn't understand that we're talking about, like, the scale of Coca-Cola, right? And so really making it explicit. So when you say, like, international development and supported 15 countries, people don't know that you're not just writing emails, like, you're meeting with the Minister of Health for Zambia. And so what does that mean? People don't have a perspective on that. So trying to be as explicit as possible in that scale and scope, and not assuming, like, this room is like, yeah, I know what USAID. How could you not know what USAID is? But there's even people who support USAID but work in the domestic space don't have a sense of that scale or timelines or the kind of results that we all were really, really delivering on, no matter where you were in the system.
And Sarah, that's such an important point to remind us that while we live in this world and we understand the complexities, most people, outside of what we've lived in, don't get what we do or the depth of what we do and the sophistication. So there's this role of kind of educating. And as you laid out, Sarah, kind of the need to educate in your resume, it feels almost doubly overwhelming. How could you explain the entire international ecosystem in a couple bullets? And so I think that gets me back to this networking question, which I wish there was a different word for it, because networking feels so gross. But Sarah, you had started us in this conversation of kind of to use a word Selena has used a couple times today, which I think is so important, authentic. Would love if, you know, in various times as you've moved through your career, just talking about some more very practical strategies for how you've made authentic connections that have helped you move through your career. And if you could be as specific and granular of, can you tell us like what words you used when you reached out to people, or like what words you would put in an email to make those kinds of connections? And also if you could also share, you know, the different kinds of meetings you had, those, you know, purposes for these different connections as well. Sarah Miner, do you want to jump in?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I thought you were speaking to Sarah Ellison. So I would say that networking for me didn't play a big role in getting a job, but it did play a big role in understanding sort of where I fit in the ecosystem of jobs and what I was interested in pursuing. And so one of the things that I did is on LinkedIn. So I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and while the international development community is mostly unemployed right now, returned Peace Corps volunteers are a community that is very broad and has spread out all over sort of various domestic sectors, and is also very deep. And so I actually would go to companies I was interested in working for, and I would look at who was affiliated with that company on LinkedIn and see if any of them had either been a Peace Corps volunteer or worked for Peace Corps. And I would also do the same with USAID. And then I would send them a LinkedIn message and say, hey, I'm also a returned Peace Corps volunteer, or I'm also a former USAIder. I'm in a career transition. I would love to talk to you just to understand more about your industry, so that I can sort of better shape my understanding of where I can fit in there. And I will say, especially among returned Peace Corps volunteers, but also among the USAiders in general, I was really surprised how often people wrote back and said, yeah, let's have a call. And so I had several 30-minute phone calls with random people off LinkedIn who just happened to have been returned Peace Corps volunteers who gave me time and advice, and really helped me understand what other industries looked like so that I could sort of tailor what I was looking for.
I'm happy to add to that. I just say, you know, being really authentic. So again, my initial community in my monthly email update was like, hey, I know a lot of us are in this space together. And, you know, if you want to be taken off this list, no problem. But I also know that you and I aren't looking for exactly the same thing. And you know me, and you're going to see things that I don't see. And boy, did they. And then like, here's the one thing you can do to help me this week. Is there, or this month, is there something I can do to help you? And really just being authentic about that and where you are in that process. I also found like such interesting conversations with folks in my network being like, wow, thanks for sharing that. I never thought about framing it that way. Or I'm also struggling with that. Let's get on a call and talk. So I think even if you're feeling like your network is just in it with you, they are, and they still want to help. The folks who are experiencing this right now, we're going to be there's a great Return Peace Corps volunteer alumni network. This is going to be a crazy alumni network. I've had friends I haven't talked to in 15 years be like, hey, can you introduce me? And I'm like, I will do anything for you. Like, what do you need? So, you know, don't be afraid to ask and be vulnerable and be honest. Be like, hey, if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. But people want to help. You want to help your friends. Just remember your friends want to help you too.
And just a quick note, I know networking can be really scary, especially if you're someone who's a bit more introverted and, you know, messaging someone randomly, a stranger on LinkedIn may not be your jam. But something that I've realized is folks love discussing their journey, especially their career trajectory. And quite frankly, people love speaking about themselves. So you know, it may take a little bit getting used to maybe the first or second time that you know, set up a virtual coffee chat with someone, but the more that you do it, the easier it gets and the less nerve-wracking it is. So if that's just a piece of advice for folks who may feel intimidated by the networking aspect.
Perfect. And I know we're running out of time, so I also want to give Selena any last word that you'd like to share.
Something that we touched on when we chatted previously, I think having corporate life has its ups and downs. Everywhere has its ups and downs. I really had to find something that met my old mission and that helped me also establish community because I left the DC area. I coach high school volleyball and it's really, really rewarding. And I get to chat with freshman girls who are really excited to tell me about their day at school. And I get to be a positive influence in their lives, and that really helps center me. I do marketing stuff. So on the side, I also support a small business and a county commissioner in their social media journeys to help support information about what's going on in the county and specifically for the commissioner. And I found a place the place I work now has a really great corporate giving platform and matches and things like that. And like something, if you don't have the funds to give money, you're able to volunteer. And then through the volunteering, they do a quarterly like raffle type of thing. And one of the people that has been, volunteering, logging their hours, gets to donate $2,000 to an organization or multiple organizations. So I think finding those ways to continually fill your cup, because I went through an identity crisis after leaving USIP and realigning that my job wasn't who I am. And then finding those ways to fill my cup. So that would be my biggest advice.
I wanted to thank so deeply this panel, Sarah Ellison, Sarah Miner, Dua Amin, Selena Westland. Thank you so much for sharing what might have been invisible to so many of us and made them explicit. I think it is with your knowledge today that's really going to help us move forward and giving us very specific strategies and tactics. Sarah also popped in a link in the chat that also might help as a straightforward exercise to figure out kind of your next steps. So thank you, Sarah, for that. We have one more half an hour with all of you, and we're going to do a continuation with a little bit of a turn of this conversation. We have just gone through this moment where we've had 4 panelists give us not only their personal experience, but specific strategies. One of the things that we know is that those strategies are really great, but making sure that we can torque them into something that we can do right after today's session sometimes feels overwhelming. So we wanted to use this second part of the panel to start putting things into practice and giving you kind of a little more of a system to get that executed and get it done. So what we're going to do with this half hour is 2 things. One, I will be showing you what is available to all of you, free, available for anybody who's working in public service on the FedsForward platform. And then I'm going to turn it to my colleagues, Katie and Kristen, to talk specifically about strategies for how we navigate that application process and specifically our resumes to make sure that they reflect authentically what we've done and what we can do, but also get us through those dreaded processes that organizations might have in that recruiting and hiring phase. And so let me just take just a quick minute to share what is available to all of you. This is FedsForward. FedsForward is a not-for-profit that we stood up to do what we've always had, which is have a repeatable, enduring capability to move all of us through our public service careers with the recognition that there's a lot of different things and tips and tricks that we need to move through. And honestly, it's a job figuring out how you transition your job. And we wanted to make it more methodical and give you a way to move through it. Almost think of it like a, just a fitness app or tracker that helps you kind of keep all of the things you need to get done so that your workouts aren't random and you get to your goal. FedsForward has a platform This platform we we created over the past 7 months. The purpose of the platform is to do this, provide you with a systematic way to translate your skills, your value, your expertise, using a large language model that we trained. It's the only one of its kind, to the persona of a public servant. That is to say, to understand what we do in the public sector as it relates to the federal government sector work, translate that work, those activities, the titles of our jobs, the outcomes we're trying to achieve, so that we can translate it into non-federal sector kinds of work in other environments. The platform we intend to be something that will give you insights, so that you don't have to just sit and think. It actually has intelligence behind it to do it for you. In order to access it, all you need to do is to go to FedsForward. You upload your resume, and then you go through something called a career wizard. This career wizard, unlike your resume, which is very backward looking, is intended to get your professional origin story. What you've done, why you did it, why you cared about it, what you loved about it, what you want to do in your next thing, or what areas you're interested in. You can answer these questions, there are 13, by typing them in, or you can speak it in and it transcribes it in real time. And after you're done with that, what you get is, in this Career Insights, a tailored, precise analysis to you. Based on everything you've just shared in answering those questions. Again, you can talk into that thing for as long as you want. And it provides analysis to you based on what you offered with evidence. And so it cites back to what you said. It gives an analysis of your soft skills in terms of the description of each of those skills and why you have it based on what you shared, and applicability in a non-federal sector kind of environment. In this case, this individual was interested in private sector. These are unique to you as a person. It also provides a hard skills analysis, pulling from everything that you provided, describes why you have that, but also applicability to the outside and words you use to explain that skill to somebody. To the point of our panelists, Sarah Ellison made this point, folks don't know what we do or what that means, giving you actual words to explain it to a non-federal person. It also does an analysis for you based on your inputs of your work style. Selena gave us the very important point that you got to know what you like and what kind of organization and culture you like. This provides that analysis based on those questions, so you have a better sense of what you want to target in terms of your ideal work environment, how you like to collaborate or not, your decision-making style, pitfalls based on what you like and don't like, and motivations, kind of what you feel like you need to light you up in your next role, as well as words you use to pitch your work style. And then finally, all of this leads to job options. These are not live job options, and intentionally so. This is intended to give you a sense of work on the outside, what they're called, what those job titles are called. To Julia's point at the beginning, what are things called? What do you do in those jobs? And why might you be a good fit? And this provides an analysis so that you can target searching and doing those networking conversations to see if in fact these are the right fits. This is a very quick overview, but we wanted to make sure that you all knew this is up there and it's available for all of us. At FedsForward, we created it by a team of volunteers. We did it with $0. It is free for everybody, and we want you to continue to use it. One last thing I will say is there's a lot of, the last point that Sarah Ellison made, one of them was about the community and our alumni community. And we know that it is through all of us who've worked in the public sector that are going to be the best people to help us move through our careers. So one thing I wanted to share as well is that we are building that community platform that's bringing all of us together. It is going to be basically a virtual platform that brings everyone who has worked in the space of the public sector together, so that we can have, by design, and we will design it so that we will be able to intersect and connect and network and grow not only within our domain areas, in this case international, and bringing all of those communities together and organizations, but also bringing all of the other ones so that we can connect across agencies, across issue areas to figure out and find our next place to make an impact. And so with that, I wanted to then turn it to Katie and Kristen, where in using some of these tools, it will help you start figuring out how to kind of target kind of your next thing. But as a complement, Kristen and Katie are going to give you some actionable coaching and resume tips that you can use immediately to take what you know you want to target and where you might want to go and build that into how you then present yourself. And so from there, I'd love to turn over to Katie and Kristen. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Karen. That's a fabulous tool. I hope you all are able to take a look because it is truly just awesome. And wow, what a great panel. I'm so grateful for all of your time. So as Karen shared, Kristen and I are going to take our remaining time and try to give you some actionable tips. I know that our time is short and I don't want you to feel stressed. We have a lot of resources and ways that you can engage with this material beyond this webinar. Before I dive in, welcome, good afternoon, good morning. My name is Katie Hogan, and I'm a director of workforce programs here at the Partnership for Public Service. And I specifically focus on early career talent, but I've been here for over 3 years. But before that, I actually spent nearly a decade working in higher education. So I worked at a university and provided students and alumni with career coaching and advising. So a lot of one-on-one resume review, career coaching. I also did a lot of group coaching. So I'm skilled in resumes, cover letters, salary negotiation, interview prep, pretty much any phase of the job search process. So I really enjoy it. And we're going to do our best to bring you some of the gems that I've gathered from my background in career coaching. I want to pass it to my wonderful colleague, Kristen Carroll, who's going to share a little bit more about her background as well.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be with you today. I'm Kristen Carroll, a manager on the workforce programs team here at the partnership. I've been here for a little over a year, but prior to that worked in higher education and career development specifically for 12 years. So that is the lens that I'm bringing to our conversation today. And with that, I'll pass it back to Katie.
Thank you. So we'll just dive right in with another fabulous resource, and that is our Career Pivot Bootcamp. So you just heard from Karen with FedsForward. That is a fabulous tool. This is another tool that you can stack in your toolkit. So you have a number of resources, but what I love about this Career Pivot Bootcamp, and you can use that QR code, you can get the link that we're going to drop in the chat. This is also a totally free resource. This was built by the partnership. Kristen and I, alongside our colleagues with career coaching experience, launched this earlier this spring to meet the moment and bring you a Career Pivot Bootcamp that really addresses every phase of the career search process. So it allows you to reflect, ask some of those deeper questions about what you enjoy about your work, what you're seeking in your next role, how to navigate that job search, even if it's been a couple of years since your last job search, how to tweak that resume, cover letter, prep for an interview, how to network. I love how much that panel talked about networking and how it can be an important element of your career transition process. So we have a module on that. What I really love about Career Pivot Bootcamp is there are 7 modules, but you don't have to do all of them. You can actually pick and choose, treat it like a menu, and use what is going to best serve you at this phase of your process. So I know we are limited on time. I could go on about Career Pivot Bootcamp, but I will just leave that link in the chat for you all and hope that you'll take a look. Okay, so we're going to get right into the good stuff and talk about what is the purpose of a resume. So resume is, the purpose of it is to get you the interview. And I know the panel talked a lot about, does the resume go to an ATS? Does it go to a human? And those are all important considerations when crafting and submitting that resume. But regardless of what the different steps are, you're ultimately trying to make this document such that it will get you an interview. So think of it that way. That is why we often recommend that you at least tailor some of your resume to the sector or the particular employer and position you are applying to. It's so important. We often use the recipe analogy. You know, everyone's resume is going to be a little bit different based on their liking. You know, some people might like a little more spice than others. So you might like to add cayenne. where others may not. It really needs to be your document and express what your skill and value and what you are seeking entails. You might also craft the recipe based on who you are serving, right? That's another way you can take the recipe analogy. You know, what is it that this employer is specifically stating is important to them as they seek to fill their workforce? And how can you tailor that recipe to make them, to entice them or to make them happy, right? And to ultimately get you that interview. So we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to just really high level, and this may not be new content, but it's important foundational pieces. What are the different resume components and formatting tips? So if we go to the next slide, really important just to name, and I know federal resumes are even, it looks to be changing, that long form federal resume is going to be shorter. But of course, in the non-federal sectors, it has often been the case that you are going to want to have about a 1 to 2 page resume in most cases. And the components look just slightly different from the federal resume. Of course, you want that clear header at the top. You want name and contact information. If you have a LinkedIn, I think it's great to just put that LinkedIn link at the top as well. Folks are probably going to search for you anyway, so make it nice and easy. And if you are thinking to yourself, I don't have a LinkedIn, or I really need to brush up on that, the Career Pivot Bootcamp has a module for that. We've also had a LinkedIn webinar that we can link for you as well. Professional summaries, they're totally optional. You can do it if it makes you, again, it's your recipe. If it makes you feel like that best conveys who you are, please include it, but there is no pressure if you do not feel called to do that. I'll also note that it's okay if you don't do it. It's totally optional. And then you want to go into your experience. So reverse chronology. So wherever you were most recently, all the way down. So you're going to do that reverse chronology. And for each employment type, you want to include the employer's name, of course, your job title, the dates that you were employed, location, and then probably 5 to 8, depending on how long you were there. I'd say 3 to 8 bullet points highlighting your responsibilities, achievements. And when we say achievements, this can be the outcomes of your work. So because you did this, or because you were responsible for that, what happened, or what did that ultimately enable your team or your organization to do? That outcome-driven storytelling on your resume is super important. And if we go to the next slide, and I'll keep it moving really quickly since I know we don't have too much time, you'll put your education after your experience. So I know when you're in school, they tell you to put your education at the top, but you all have experience now. So you'll want that experience to be above education. And again, it's reverse chronology. So your most recently awarded degree and highest degree. So let's just say, for example, perhaps you have a master's degree in international development, and that was your most recent degree. You'd put that at the top, and then your undergraduate, and then any relevant certifications can follow. Optional sections include skills summary, volunteer work, awards, honors, and professional affiliations. And don't leave that out. That definitely, I mean, maybe perhaps you can't include everything in that 1 to 2 pages, but if there's a place you have volunteered, or if there is an organization that you helped co-found, put that on your resume, because that certainly tells the employer something about you and your personal brand and the value that you bring. Okay, things to not include. I know in the federal resume, it is optional, but you can include salary. We really recommend you don't do that. Just leave salary off of that resume. And for that matter, try not to share salary history ever, if you can help it. It's becoming increasingly not legal in states and localities to ask for salary history, but just leave salary out of it, especially in that resume. Also, I know that the federal resume format, or at least its previous iteration, would often have you have supervisor names and contact info. You do not have to put that on your non-federal standard, industry standard resume. You don't have to put your average weekly hours. And we get this question a lot, especially for our really seasoned folks, you know, how far back should you go? In general, experiences 15 years or older that are not directly relevant to the position, you can probably leave those off. Now, if they are directly relevant, of course, you'll want to put those on because that'll appeal to them. But if it's not directly relevant, there's not a lot of pressure after about 15 years. Okay, and then resume formatting tips. So I always joke, you want to keep your resume as boring as possible. But I mean it. You know, I know it can feel gratifying, especially if you're a creative person, to really mix in some fun like fonts and colors and design elements. In general, you probably want to stay away from that because, again, the purpose of this resume is to get you an interview. So you want to really just keep it black and white, really simple, easy to read. So some of our formatting tips, again, simple, clean layout, and we have examples in the Career Pivot Bootcamp, but really just make sure it reads nice and easy left to right. Consistent font and, kind of, I don't know a better word, but just boring font, like Times New Roman, Arial, and 10 to 12 point. Use clear section headings and bullet points. So I just went through the different sections you'd want to have. So you want to have experience, education, awards. Just make those really clear. And then we do recommend a bullet point resume. That's typically what folks see, especially in the private sector, though I know some folks prefer a narrative where they have the employer header and position for each position they've previously held, and they want to just do a paragraph. I recommend bullet points, but I do understand a narrative format is an option, and it is your recipe ultimately. Keep it concise, 1 to 2 pages, and save as a PDF. So unless they suggest another format or request another format, we really recommend submitting resumes as a PDF. You want to avoid tables, columns, graphs, icons. Again, I've talked about make it boring, but we talked about application tracking systems on the panel earlier. Those actually have a hard time reading content that might be within an Excel sheet or within a table or within even a text box. And that can ultimately make them knock out your resume before it even gets to that human review. So just, again, start in a Word document, nice and simple. Don't do any columns or anything like that. And no fancy templates or color blocks. We've talked about this. Don't over design. You don't want to write your resume in the first person. So you don't want to say I managed budgets. You just start with that clean action verb, managed budgets of X amount, and so on. And remember, you don't want to list everything. And I think you all know this, but the federal resume, it often was that you wanted to list everything. So it's counterintuitive, but you really want to list what that employer is most interested in. You want to make that recipe most to the liking of the employer that you're trying to get in the door with. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to my wonderful colleague, Kristen.
Thank you, Katie. So we are going to spend some time talking about strong bullet points. That is the main real estate and the meat, if you will, of your resume. And we know that's where we want to put a lot of our effort into making that strong case for yourself, making the connection of why you and your skills to the job you're applying for. So as Katie mentioned, we're looking for 3 to 8 bullet points depending on the role. You're asking great questions in the chat. I'm going to try and incorporate as many as I can into this content. So one person did ask about the reverse chronological order. If you have experience that's older than 15 years, but it's highly relevant, again, that is your decision to make. I would argue it's more important to have the most relevant experience on your resume. So go ahead and bring something back, even if it is older. And this is also an opportunity to go against the rule, if you will. If you have a highly relevant position that is not your most recent position, you can still put that at the top of your resume. So instead, you might have a relevant experience section where you would get into those most relevant roles. And then you would have an additional experience section where you would cover other roles that may be out of reverse chronological order, and that's okay. So our strong bullet points, we know they're going to start with an action verb, and you want to try and vary the words that you're using and also mirror them to the job description as much as possible. You also want the bullets to be really action-oriented and detail the outcome, if possible, with some quantifiable metrics. We always get asked, and I see questions in the chat, what if I don't have those metrics? And we hear you. It can be tricky. You just simply may not have them, and that's okay. I would think about, what can you quantify? So do you know how many people were on your team? How many stakeholders were involved? How many people received an email or a communication you sent? How many people attended an event or a program? Quantify everything that is within your control to quantify, and the rest, use your best judgment on the impact of your product. So did something increase? Did something, have a positive impact? Those aren't numbers, but you can still express the feeling of that outcome, even if you don't have a tangible metric to put with it, and then just use the numbers you have that are known and within your control. So we have a couple of examples here on screen. I won't read those just for the sake of time, but they are going to come right back on the next slide because I want to dig deeper into these bullet points and how we might translate them from the public sector into the private. FedsForward is a great tool that Karen shared with us earlier. That is one option that you have. Again, like, you have multiple tools in your toolbox for doing this work, and that could be a great place to practice with translating some of these skills and thinking about the language that you're using. We will get into AI in a couple slides. That is another option for trying to translate, how you're conveying your work. So in this example, just quickly, a few things that noticeably changed when we're going from the public sector to the private sector. We're changing from, a team of 12 across 3 provinces to an operations team across multiple regions. So we're keeping it a little more general and private sector friendly. Instead of the specific deliverables of, food distribution and cutting delivery delays, we're talking about a supply chain process, and also conveying these as, critical services to 15,000 end users instead of displaced persons. This may be painful to change some of this language. I know it's, so close to who you are and what you do. It is very personal work, and the second response might feel a little less personal. But again, it's about getting that job interview, getting your foot in the door, and just making the language a bit more private sector friendly. We have one more example on the next slide. So again, some of the key things that changed, really thinking about, in the first example, you're listing out specific stakeholders that you worked with. In the private sector example, you're just talking about those cross-functional teams and external stakeholders. Even simple word changes like policy coordination to policy alignment. Alignment just maybe, more of a buzzword within certain private sector organizations. It's great to always look at the job description and see if you can piece out some of those buzzwords. And we'll go to the next slide. This is a chart. I know it may be hard to read, but this is to illustrate some of the transferable skills that you possess. It certainly will not be comprehensive of everything. And again, I think the FedsForward skills assessment tool would be a great place to, check out. We're also going to share some skills assessment resources in the chat that the partnership has developed. So we have a federal employee, but of course is free and available to any public servant. It's a skills assessment worksheet. So again, it won't be comprehensive of every skill that you possess. There are so many, but it will, cover a lot of them in different categories. If you're a pen to paper person, it's great just to take some time with that and think about the skills you're highly developed in and where you want to grow. And the real sweet spot is that combination of where you're highly skilled and what you really enjoy doing. So we have the worksheet, we have a blog post on skills assessment, as well as a previous webinar that we're sharing in the chat for you. But this slide and this chart is just meant to illustrate skills that you have and what that might look like in the private sector, and then how you would talk about and describe in your resume or on a cover letter, specifically how those skills would translate. And I know we're moving so quickly, but I do hope you check out those resources in the chat. So next up, we're just going to talk a bit about growing within the same role over time. This is also a question we receive often. What if my job title or the work itself didn't change, but I was in that role for, well over a decade or longer? So on the next slide, we have a few examples of how to do that. So this is just one example of growth over time, but essentially you are within, one organization in a single overarching role, but you can show that career progression. So you would just have one header and then subheadings under that with the years specifically listed. And then as much as possible, you want to be able to demonstrate what did I specifically do in a previous role and demonstrate that growth from role to role, whether an increase in scope, responsibility, etc. And then, of course, we've talked about this a lot already today, and I know that you know that we want to be tailoring to the resume as much as possible. That is how we're hopefully getting around those ATS systems. So a tip we always like to share is either to have a dual screen, one screen with the job description, one with your resume, or print out both documents and really move back and forth between the two to be able to mirror what is in the job description with what the language and keywords you're using on your resume. And just remember that a resume is a capability statement. It is not a comprehensive list of everything, but it is to get you that interview. All right, this is one of our favorite tips, is to create a rolling resume. And if you are not familiar with that term, on the next slide, we will break down. It is an internal document. So this is not a resume that you would ever apply with or share with employers. It's going to hold everything you've ever done in great detail. You can use as many bullet points as you want. You can have everything that's 15 years and older on it. And it essentially becomes a menu that you can pull from when you're applying to a role. So that way you can tailor specifically to the job. You have your rolling resume of everything you've ever done, and then you're just bringing over those bullet points and experiences that are most relevant to that role. Just so we can get through our last bit of content utilizing AI. I know we got a preview of FedsForward, which is one, large language model platform using AI. We, of course, have other platforms like a ChatGPT or a Gemini. We always like to just caution if you're using AI, just make sure it's never your final product. It's a starting point, and that you're integrating your authentic voice. And then on the next slide, just for the sake of time, I think the last AI tip that I'll share is this formula for getting a better result. If you've used a ChatGPT before and it's just not giving you the results you're hoping for, try this role plus goal plus context for a better result. So for example, you want it to, prompt it to act like a hiring manager for this specific role, and you can even upload the job description and then let them know, I'm applying for this role, act as a hiring manager based on my resume, and upload your resume. What skills should I highlight? What skills am I missing? How strong of a candidate am I based on this resume? And then if we go to the next slide. Oh, I did it. Okay, with 2 minutes to spare. And I know that we do have a closing still, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to take additional questions because I know there is a survey that we want to share as well.
Yeah, Kristen, I would say maybe you can take one question, but before you do, I want to just flag that we're going to start a very quick evaluation. If you are please able to participate in that, it'd be really helpful. We want to make sure that these continue to meet you where you are and provide the most useful resources that we can. One question on effectiveness, one question on applicability, and then a final one on just what might be most useful in the future. So Kristen, I'll turn it back to you if you want to pull maybe one quick question out of the Q&A, and then I will get us wrapped up. Thanks, everyone. All right, Katie, did anything stand out? I'm going through the chat now.
I wish we could answer all of them. I'm gonna pick one. So, because I think I've heard it a few times and it's an interesting one. The question is, I noticed that many organizations are now looking for unicorns, meaning people who can do it all: business development, program management, statistical analysis, advocacy, etc. Would you recommend still applying, or is there a different approach to this? I hear this often, and I know it can probably feel intimidating or frustrating. My response, and I'd love to hear Kristen's input as well, is still apply if it is a job or an employer that interests you. And remember, I believe this, my best friend was a USAID employee as well. I believe USAID employees are unicorns. I mean, you all did do it all. You don't have to meet every single qualification or thing that they're looking for, but remember that you were able to balance a bunch of different things and pivot and learn. And I think that's what you want to convey. So if there's like 5 seemingly different jobs that they want this one person to be capable of doing, and you feel pretty comfortable with like 2 or 3, I'd say still apply, really lean into the skills and experience you have related to those 3 elements of the 5 they've listed, but then really lean into the fact that the element of your previous work and organization was such that you were expected to wear multiple hats. You were expected to learn and unlearn and learn again. You were expected to get up to speed on things that maybe were unimaginable a year or 2 previous. So like really focus on that. And I would say absolutely still apply. I'll also put in my 2 cents that if you can ever find somebody who is working there or has worked there, I think that always helps too, to kind of get a better sense of like, why are they asking for all of this? What really would make someone stand out? How does that team function? Whatever. I'll just say, and I know it's a little different, but the job description for the role that I applied for at the partnership 3.5 years ago, I almost didn't apply. And I called someone that I knew there. And when they explained to me what they were looking for, I was like, got it. That's actually perfect. And here I am. It doesn't always work out that way where you know someone, but if you do, I think that can be really helpful to decode what they are actually seeking. Kristen, what would you say?
I would just add, and I know it depends on what position you're in life, because you may just need a job and you can't be as particular about what the role is, but to just ask yourself, like, do you want to be a unicorn or do you want to be a specialist? Because you may be perfectly capable of doing all of the different roles within the role that are outlined in the job description, but is that fulfilling? Is that going to feel chaotic to you, overwhelming to you, or do you really just like to focus and hone in on one thing? And again, that is a luxury that you might not have in your job search, to be that selective. But if you are able to consider, it's part of, you have to know yourself, right? That's part of your job search, is to know in what environments you will thrive and succeed and when you will not. And so we don't, even if we feel the pressure to be unicorns, that's asking a lot of us, and we don't all have to be.
Thank you both so much. For everybody who is online, I know we have lots of questions and folks want to know more. So if you're interested in hearing more from Katie and Kristen, or watching longer form versions of everything that you got a very quick snapshot of, please check out the boot camp that was shared in the chat. And there's recordings on all of these topics, so you'll have more to watch there. Just to get us wrapped up again, I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank Karen for moderating, OneAID for their incredible partnership in getting all of you here and helping make sure that we asked questions that would be helpful to all of you, and to Katie and Kristen for everything that you just shared, really tactical advice for folks to use right now. Just to make sure that everyone knows what's coming up on our FedSupport agenda, we have a session next week with a coach focused on helping those who have been furloughed or have been separated from their role in the last few months maintain resilience in this increasingly challenging environment. And Katie and Kristen will then be back following week on the 22nd to do an AI in the job search session. So if that's particularly of interest to you, make sure that you check that out. I know that there's a link in the chat for all of that. And then if you are in the DMV area, there will be an in-person resilience session as well on the 21st, and we'll be sharing information about that. So please feel free to check it out. And just thank you again for taking the time to join us. We know you're all very busy and there's a lot going on, I'm sure, personally, professionally, in the job search for everybody. So thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you've done. And please continue to check us out. We'll be sharing resources and trying to provide as much support as we can. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.